Hey guys, Metal Jesus here, and today I want to talk all about the Nintendo 3DS. This is a handheld that when it initially came out, I really wasn't blown away by it, but over time, I became very impressed with the catalog of games that got released on it. And so today I'm going to do an overview of my 3DS collection. I've broken them out into different little categories here to help make some sense of it. And I'm going to give you my thoughts on some of the highlights. Let's take a look. I think normally I would start with some of the heavy hitters, but for this video, actually, I'm going to not necessarily jump into the big Nintendo releases. I'm gonna actually go with some of the 2D platforming games I have on the system. Here is Castlevania Lords of Shadow Mirror of Fate. This is a Castlevania game that a lot of people are kind of on the fence about, and I can understand why, because it definitely plays a little bit differently than your traditional Castlevania game. Myself, actually, this is one of the first games I played in 3D on the 3DS that actually I was really blown away by. Now, a lot of people compare this to, say, God of War, if God of War was a 2D platforming game, but I enjoy it. Here's another surprise on the system that I actually enjoyed quite a bit, and that is Batman Arkham Origins Blackgate. Now, what I like about this is that this was released at a time when most of the Batman games we were getting, were kind of open world 3D adventure games, but this is a 2D platforming game and it's actually really good. Here is Trip Saga, and this is cool because it's 6 games on one cartridge, and there's a ton of different variety on this this package right here. Very cool. If you haven't played the Trip series, it's really fun, especially if you're into retro and you're into simple games that you can kind of pick up and play. Perfect for a handheld. Cave Story has been released on a bunch of different systems, and well, it's easy to see why, because it's a very well-made game. I picked this one up because, again, it was on the 3DS, so therefore it is in 3D, and I'm kind of a sucker for that. I initially didn't really care much for the 3D aspect of it, but once they released the new version of the 3DS handheld and they improved the 3D performance, where it actually kind of tracked your eyes, then I started going, okay, I want to play every game, or at least try every game in 3D. And so that's one of the reasons why I picked up Cave Story. Really fun game. And of course, here is Shovelknight, another game that has been on a bunch of different systems. But like I mentioned, one of the cool things about the 3DS is that you get to play these games in 3D, which is, a new experience. It's something that you don't get on any other system. And so when I saw Shovelknight got a physical on here, I had to pick it up. And of course, it's a classic now. One of the interesting things about the 3DS, well, I guess interesting in one way and kind of disappointing in another, is that it's not really great for 3D racing games. At least in my opinion, because at the same time, I also had the Vita and also the PSP, which is excellent at racing games, and there's a ton of them. Now, I mention that because I just want to, shout out a couple racing games that I did pick up on the 3DS, and that, of course, is Hot Wheels, World's Best Driver. I also have a version of Ridge Racer on here, which was kind of a no-brainer because I do really like that series. And then here is Driver Renegade. And I didn't know anything about this, but I really like the Driver series. Remember, that started on the PlayStation 1. And of course, if I remember right, it was actually on the PS2 and then also on the PS3. But anyways, yeah, it's cool to get a portable version of Driver. So not a great game, but, unique to the 3DS. Like pretty much every Nintendo system, they're always great with releasing older games on the newer system. And so anytime there was a physical version of something that came out, I would always want to check it out. And so the first one, of course, is Sega Classics Collection in 3D. And again, the reason why I picked this up is because, well, here are 9 classic Sega games, but you get to play them in 3D for the first time, at least the first time for me. And that was really exciting to be able to play games like Power Drift or even the original Sonic the Hedgehog in 3D. So I was a sucker for that. I was not disappointed. Now, I believe that there are another volume of these games released in Japan. Not 100% sure about that, so please let me know down in the comments. Some other ones I want to mention really quick is Centipede Infestation. Now, I know there's probably not a ton of people out there really excited about a new Centipede game. However, what's really interesting about this is that it's actually programmed by WayForward. So that developer should be very familiar to you if you are familiar with the Shantae series. So they made this game, and it's kind of a run and gun. It's actually a cool take on the classic Centipede series. And I've mentioned Frogger 3D in a previous Hidden Gems video for the 3DS. And the reason why I thought it was pretty cool is because it takes the original Frogger idea, but makes it in 3D. So it's actually got polygons. They added some new elements to it. I really dig it. Of course, I like the original Frogger arcade game, and so playing this is pretty cool. Now, the performance isn't great on the 3DS, but if you like Frogger, if you're a fan of the original arcade game, definitely check it out. All right, the next pile of games is kind of what I'm calling sort of random 3D games. I didn't really know what to call this stack here, but let's go ahead and start with Resident Evil Revelations. That is a side game to the main series, and I originally got this on the 3DS and actually liked it quite a bit. I eventually got it on the Vita, which I think runs a little bit better. And then now, of course, you can get this ported over to, I believe, even the PlayStation 4. But if you liked, classic Resident Evil games, definitely check this out. Next up is a game I was very excited to pick up once it was announced. That, of course, is Metal Gear Solid Snake Eater 3D on the 3DS. Now, originally, this came out on the PlayStation 2, and actually, I've owned two versions of the game on the PS2, and both discs have never worked. I don't know what it is about that game. So my first time playing it actually was on the 3DS, and I thought it was really great. I mean, it's so cool to play the game in 3D. So I know I keep mentioning that. I know not everyone's really a fan of the 3D aspect of it, but man, I am a sucker for it, and playing Metal Gear in 3D was definitely awesome. This is a cool game. Now, speaking of stealth games, I'm also a big fan of the Tom Clancy Splinter Cell series, and so I was curious to see what, Splinter Cell was going to look like on the 3DS, and I don't know what it is about this game. I mean, I just couldn't get into it. I'm a big fan of all of them on the major consoles, but the 3DS version, I just couldn't get into it. I don't know why. However, there was a Tom Clancy game that I thought was really well done on the 3DS, and that, of course, you guys are seeing it here. That is Ghost Recon Shadow Wars, and as you see here, it is a 3D turn-based tactical game, which is really cool. So it's not trying to be stealth. It's, of course, very much more methodical, much more thought out. You plan all your moves. You have a squad. It's a fantastic game. I've covered it in my Hidden Gems. If you like these kind of games, you should definitely check it out. Here's a pretty cool shooter that came out on a bunch of different systems, but I have the 3DS version here because I like it a lot, and that, of course, is Nano Assault. Really fun shooter, very solid, lots of action, very fast-paced, and, of course, looks great in 3D. Here's a game that I got based on a recommendation from Reggie, and admittedly, I haven't put a lot of time into that. That, of course, is Rodea the Sky Soldier. Now, this was made by the creator of Nights into Dreams. So I think that's why a lot of people were initially really interested in this. Now, if I understand correctly, it was originally supposed to come out on the Wii, but then they released it on the Wii U in the United States, but the Wii version was like a bonus version. Not really sure, but it's a game I haven't put a lot of time into, admittedly. It came out at a time when I had a bunch of other games to play. So if you've played this and you like it, please let me know if I should check it out down in the comments below. One of the great things about Nintendo's handhelds is that there are always a ton of high-quality role-playing games released for it. And so these are the ones that I have in my collection. Now, I'm not going to go through all of them, but I do want to mention a few. The first one I want to mention is Stella Glow, and as you can see by the footage here, it is a turn-based role-playing game. And the story in this is not mind-blowing, although it does have some really decent character development. But what's really interesting about this is that it turned out to be the last game published by the developer who also made the Luminous Arc series. So if you like that series, I believe it's on the DS, then you might want to check out Stella Glow. Here's an RPG a lot of you are going to be familiar with, but I do want to mention it because it's pretty interesting, and that is, of course, Xenoblade Chronicles 3D. So the first thing to know about this is that it is only going to work on the newer model. Well, new when it came out, although I think most people probably would have it today, but it does require the slightly more powerful new Nintendo 3DS, so just be aware of that. Now, what's really impressive about this game is that it's a port of the massive Wii RPG, and I'm talking massive. This game is huge on the Wii, and it was amazing that they were able to actually port it over to the 3DS. And this game will take a minimum of anywhere from 60 to 70 hours just to beat the main story. But if you want to do everything in this game, you can spend 120 hours, 140 hours. There is a ton of content in this. Another game I want to mention is Heroes of Ruin by Square Enix. Now, this is an RPG that not a lot of people talk about, but it's actually pretty decent and usually can be purchased for not too much money. And it's cool because it's a kind of Western style hack and slash in the vein of, say, Diablo, stuff like that. Very fun, solid game, really good gameplay. Yeah, it should not be missed. Of course, I also want to mention Bravely Default, which is another really epic RPG on the 3DS. A lot of people first played it here. I think for me, the thing that really stood out for this, again, was the 3D. When I turned the 3D on with this, I was just blown away by how beautiful it looked. This is a gorgeous game, a lot of content here, definitely a classic. This is kind of my random pile where I didn't quite know how to organize some of these games because they're a little bit out there or maybe just don't fit in other categories. But the first one I want to mention here is Spirit Camera. Now, this is going to look kind of familiar to people who like the Fatal Frame series that came out on the PlayStation 2. This is technically in that series, even though they don't really have that name here. What was cool about this at the time is that it's really just augmented reality. So it uses the camera on the 3DS and puts these ghosts and, objects in your real world. Now, to be fair, it didn't work that great. But at the time, it was kind of a neat little novelty and maybe kind of a neat little tech demo. I do want to mention a game called Crush 3D. So this is a puzzle game that originally came out on the PSP, but didn't get a whole lot of love there. I think it was kind of overlooked because people weren't really familiar with it. Plus, it works extremely well on the 3DS in the 3D environment. Usually this game can be picked up for a couple bucks. If you like puzzle games, you should definitely check it out. And then here is Boulder Dash XL 3D. So this is a brand new remake of the classic Commodore 64 game. At least that's where I played it initially, way back in the 80s. On the Commodore, Boulder Dash was a classic, and it still holds up today. I mean, I was really excited to see this. I couldn't believe that they actually did this. I mean, it's one of those games where decades have gone by between versions of it, and to see a new version on the 3DS was very cool. Does not disappoint. So if you're a Commodore 64 fan like I am, and you remember Boulder Dash, pick this up. And now let's go ahead and talk about some of the more common and frankly iconic games that came out on the 3DS, specifically from Nintendo. Nintendo went all out on this system. It's a dream to collect for it because there's so many great games on it. Now, I'm not going to run through all of these because you guys are going to be familiar with a lot of them, but I do want to talk about some, including my all-time favorite 3DS game. Can you guess what it is? Well, it is Kirby Planet Robobot. I loved this game. I loved every moment of it. It was such a great Kirby game. I just felt like every level had something new to offer. It never got boring. It was always exciting to play. I couldn't wait until the next level just to see what was going to be around the corner and what gameplay mechanic they were going to throw at us. It was one of those games when I finished it, I couldn't wait to start it again. Another game I really enjoy playing is Super Mario 3D Land. This is another one of those games where I'm surprised at how creative Nintendo can be with a franchise that has been around forever, but yet they seem to be able to just dig deep, be creative, and surprise players. Love this game. Another game that really surprised me was Ultimate NES Remix. So this is where Nintendo takes 16 classic NES games and then remixes those and kind of fires them at you really quick, almost like WarioWare. This is really fun if you've played a ton of those old games and you're not sick of them, but you're looking for something kind of new. This is a lot of fun. And here we have The Legend of Zelda: A Link Between Worlds. Now the cool mechanic that they added here that was a lot of fun was that Link could actually merge into walls and then move flatly through an environment. So he could move through cracks or he could go around corners. It sounds kind of dumb, but actually when you play it, it's a lot of fun. Here's a game that I found a little bit disappointing. I'm going to be curious to hear what you guys think about it down in the comments below, but this is Chibi-Robo Ziplash. So Chibi-Robo originally came out on the GameCube, and that was a really fun 3D kind of open world game that had a ton of personality. Well, when they brought it over to the 3DS, they made it into more of a 2D platforming game, and it really, at least in my opinion, doesn't have quite as much personality. So I played a little bit of this, but ultimately I just couldn't get into it. So I'd love to know what you guys think. Now here's a game that was a bit of a surprise when it was announced, and that is the sequel to Luigi's Mansion on the GameCube. This, of course, is Dark Moon. Now, I don't know about you, but again, when I heard about this, I was like, oh man, they're gonna release a sequel. It's gonna be on the handheld, and of course, it's gonna support 3D. That just seemed perfect, and this game was definitely a lot of fun. Another game I was a little bit disappointed in, and I was really surprised that I was, because I really love the 2D platforming Metroid games. You know, Super Metroid, Metroid Zero Mission, all of those games I absolutely love. So when this was announced and when it came out, I thought for sure I was gonna love it. And I didn't love it. And I think it's because there's something about the controls and the combat they just changed it enough to where the new abilities just didn't do it for me. I don't know. I mean, not a terrible game, but also one that left me a little bit disappointed. So again, I'd love to know what you guys thought about it down in the comments. So that's a quick look at my 3DS game collection, but as you guys see, it's not a massive collection, but it is filled with games that I think are classics, as well as a bunch of hidden gems. Now, depending on the site that you look at, there does appear to be over 1,000 games released for the 3DS, although I do think that includes games that were released just digitally on the eShop. But as of the recording of this video, 3DS games are still sold at GameStop, and so I'm very curious to know from you guys what games you think I should be picking up and adding to my 3DS collection. Because now is the time to do it. I mean, I don't know how much longer these are going to be available for sale for relatively cheap at GameStop. So please let me know down in the comments below. All right, guys, thank you very much for watching. Thank you for subscribing, and take care.